Ms. Nyman.
Here.
Mrs. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Brad Updegrove.
Here.
Mr. Roger Updegrove. Mr. Zawada.
Here.
Mr. Brophy.
Here.
Ms. Deeroff.
Present.
Mrs. Kratz.
Here.
Mr. Pinarello.
Here.
All present.
Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board held an executive session on Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. The topic was legal. The meeting lasted approximately 45 minutes.
All right, this evening I would like to present the school board meeting calendar, and as it was shared with everyone, not much has changed. From previous years, we are looking to have our no meeting in July. We have been trying to move away and have a month without meetings. And then August, we have our 2 meetings, September, October, November. There is going to be 1 meeting for December, which would be our reorganization meeting. And if there would be a need to have any voting items, we can tag that on to the December meeting. January, February, March, April, May, and June would all continue to operate with 2 meetings per month. They are the 2nd and 4th Tuesday, as we have always done. Any questions? All right, seeing no questions, I am going to have this on for voting for approval next week at our voting meeting.
BCIU, Mr. Brophy.
Okay, so, get started. BCIU meeting went till 10 o'clock last week, so there was a lot of things discussed. I won't go over the internal stuff in the BCIU because we really don't need that, but there are some things I think would be interesting on the board. There's a thing coming out, and I'll give this folder to Ms. Torshi at the end so she has some records of this. There's a thing called Digital Navigator coming out. We're not on track to get it right away, but it's within 2 years. It's free support and accessing using technology for people in the district. The information's on here. It would be nice to, for the district to get that out to the people in the district so they know it's coming and they know what it's about. And it's for Berks County. So that's one thing. Also for the board, there's a school safety security summit that's being held. I think you're already aware of that. It would behoove us to have somebody go to that Wednesday, April 24th. So we have to register for that. That's another thing that would be very good for us to go to. Another thing that's out there, now the BCIU has a lot of different programs, a lot of different things. So that's why I'm bringing them all up so we're aware of it. There's a 10th annual Camp Connect. Now what Camp Connect is, it's a free bereavement camp for ages 6 to 16. If children have experienced death or something close to them, they can then be registered to go to this camp and receive counseling for it. They're individually talked to first to see what their needs are. It's June 17th to 20, and it's August 5th to 8th. So that's another thing that would be something for us to stay on top of. I imagine it's just for Berks, but I don't think they would stop us if we sent kids from other parts of the school. There's a thing, the Ann Sullivan Award. We have someone nominated for that, and that's, I'm sure Mrs. Torchy can give you a little more information on that. It's a big deal. You know, everybody, there's about 18 people, one from each district nominated for it. So that was another thing to keep in mind, and we may want to, at some point, when we have our nominee, bring him in and talk to him about it, say how good it is.
Absolutely. After the event occurs, we can definitely recognize that individual that we are nominating for that position. They've had the Annie Sullivan Award probably for the duration of my career, 30 years. And each year, we do recognize someone who goes above and beyond in working with students with special needs. I believe my second year here, I nominated Mrs. Barb Van Buskirk, and she actually was the recipient of the Ann Sullivan Award. So it's really an awesome night.
Yeah, it's an honor for them. Now, also at BCIU, in doing the different state of education, and I'm sure Mrs. Torchy knows about all this stuff. She's heard it already, so you're hearing it a second time. They did pretty much some surveys and different things. They've come up with the top 5 challenges to education. Student mental health is one. Staffing shortages is another, which we're all aware of that. Budget pressures, academic challenges, and school facility issues. Some of the biggest things are substitute teachers, instructional aides, special education teachers, transportation personnel, regular education teachers. I'm saying this to show that this is not a Boyertown problem. This is a statewide problem that they're looking into, and they're trying to see what can be done to resolve it. And it's not an easily resolved situation, but everybody's aware of it. However, BIU did something interesting as far as looking for teachers and teachers and substitutes. They put up billboards. They have 4 billboards out there about hiring, and I will give this to you also, at 4 different locations. And they got a good, I'm not suggesting we do this, by the way, just going to bring it up. But they got a really good price for the billboards. And not only that, if the billboards aren't rented, their stuff stays up until someone rents it. So they may pay for 30 days and may get 90 days out of it. So pretty interesting. And just, once again, another thing that the IU goes and looks at and goes and finds more things. I also have here their comprehensive plan. I'll also include that, so you have that. And I believe for the people in the front of the room, there was a dinner on the 25th, annual superintendent's and president's dinner that we went to. I don't know if Mr. Panarello wants to share anything with us that went on at the dinner, or anything he got out of it, or besides a good meal. So, but that's that part of it. I do have one.
I did try to hide in that picture.
I did notice that, and the picture's there. I did notice that. You didn't do a very good job of hiding.
Well, that's because Mr. Panarello made a comment and they made me move.
Yeah, and you stuck out. I see that. You were just a little bit in the back corner. Couple things they do at their meeting. One thing they do at their meeting that something for us to just think about. I don't know how we do this, but they have a thing called BCIU Presents. And what that does, it features a program each month of one of their programs. And what they do is describe it. They talk about how it's working. They talk about the pride in it, of course, and all the different aspects of it. Now, where I'm bringing it up here is, I believe this concept could be applied to scholastic programs also. Whereas we could take, like, our math program and do something each quarter and say, okay, here's our math, here's our philosophy of getting kids from kindergarten to 12th grade, here's why we do the different things in the years we do them, and here's what we're teaching, and here's what we expect to get out of it, and here's how well we think we're doing, or here's our shortcomings that we're trying to address. I think that would fit in real well. Do that something, I'm not saying monthly, but maybe quarterly, where you would be able to tie that in with the comprehensive plan and the things we're changing, and also keep the public and the board notified of how our programs are working. You could then move that on to maybe social studies, arts and music, and different things like that, where you could go on. And I think it'd be a good way for us to let the public know what's going on and how we feel about our programs and why we do what we do, and also keep the board in touch with what's going on. So that's pretty much it. The only other thing is that Employee of the Month. I don't know if you want to do an Employee of the Month, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
All right, great.
Okay? Thank you. Quite welcome.
BCTC, Mr. Updegrove.
Yes, I have a few announcements. I mean, at the last meeting, I didn't get enough information, but I have information now. The BCTC horticulture students at the farm show won. Avon Reiner won a third place in the silk centerpiece section, and we had one in the business management entrepreneurship, and Ivan Griffin from Boyertown for company CEO. He placed up front, and that was about it. But there was more information. I have a meeting at the end of the month with it. Well, I'll have more information for next month's meeting. Thank you.
Ask Mrs. Landis to come on up to the podium for the Office of Teaching and Learning Data and Assessment presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. This evening, we'd just like to give you an overview of some of our state assessment data from the 22-23 school year. As you know, the majority of the students take the state assessments in the spring, but it's really until summer and fall until we get all of our data, and the growth data comes in even a little bit later than that. So we're going to give you an overview of some of that information, K-12 for our district. The first slide here is just some resource materials. There's some links here that you can look at your leisure. Takes you to the Future Ready Index site, which we'll be referencing. There's also a link to a previous board presentation that was done that gave an overview and understanding of what the Future Ready Index is. And then a couple articles that were in the Reading Eagle, which the first one of those, we're going to take a look at some information this evening. Back in November, when the state assessment data came out, the Reading Eagle posted an article on the Berks County PSSA and Keystone exam proficiency results. Now, this report was strictly on proficiency numbers. It didn't talk about growth or any of those other pieces, and we're going to look at that a little bit tonight as well. Obviously, that last slide's too small to read, so right here is the zoom in on the Boyertown data. So ELA Math and Science. At the elementary level, the ELA, English Language Arts PSSA, is taken in grades 3 through 5, and then in grades 6 through 8 at the middle school as well. Same goes for math. And then in science, the science PSSA is just given in 4th grade and 8th grade currently. The high school information is connected to the Keystone data. And you'll notice as you look at this that the one outlier that looks really strange is that high school math number. So we're going to talk about that a little bit and give a little bit of background on why that looks so odd there. And some of the challenges with the data still as a result of the pandemic. So that high school Keystone algebra data is skewed because of the pandemic. So basically what happens is the 22-23 Keystone data that was presented was for the 11th grade cohort last year. So it's our current senior class. But what happens is not all students take the algebra Keystone during 11th grade. In fact, most of them take it in years prior to that. And then their score is banked or kind of held on to until that 11th grade year so that everybody in that grade level is reported at the same time on the Keystone exam. So our advanced math students, our most advanced math students from our current senior class, took the Algebra Keystone exam in December of 2019 during their 8th grade year. They were in advanced geometry that year. They finish up their algebra content kind of the first third of the year, and then they take that Algebra Keystone exam in December of their 8th grade year. So that group of students actually did take that Keystone exam that December, but as you know, 3 months later, March of 2020, a lot of things happened in the world. So because of that, everybody in the 2019 school year was marked COVID proficient, is what the state called it, for all of the state assessments that year. Because that December 2019 group, and there was a January group in some districts as well, a January 2020 group, those were the only kids who took any state assessments that year, and then the rest of them were all canceled because of the pandemic. So literally all students were marked COVID proficient that year, which means that basically those scores didn't count. Those kiddos were still included in the denominator of our number, so they were included in our total number of students, but their scores didn't count for that numerator for determining our percentage. So in actuality, in that group, in our current group of seniors, there are 89 students who took that Algebra Keystone exam in December of 2019, and 100% of them, all 89 of those students, were proficient or above. As you can see on this slide, actually 91% of them scored advanced, but those scores were not included in last year's data because of that COVID proficient situation. This impact was experienced by all districts who had 8th graders take the Algebra Keystone in 2019. And the other impact of that is the kids who were in 8th grade in the 2019-20 school year who were in Algebra 1 that year, they were in that Keystone Trigger course that year as well, but they never took the Keystone exam at all because of COVID canceling their test. So that was another 150 kids that didn't take that Keystone exam. So their scores weren't counted either. And they're also typically some of our higher performing students. So that's why we have that strange 14.5%. In actuality, there's probably like another 60% of the kids in our current senior class who likely would have added proficiency to that overall score. We did request to meet virtually with representatives from PDE to explain this to us when we got these numbers, and they looked at our data with us, they walked us through it, and they explained to us exactly what I just explained to you about the impact of the pandemic and banking those scores. This slide just shows you on the Future Ready PA Index page, when that page was first released to us during the preview, there were several places where it spoke to exactly this issue because, again, this was not just a Boyertown challenge, but it impacted districts all across the state of Pennsylvania. So I just kind of enlarged what's on the left there and blew it up for you a little bit on the right so that you can see some of those pieces that explain what we experienced there. This also just shows you when you go on the Future Ready PA Index page that it tells you right on the main page that efforts to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic have impacted the availability of some data. I included here a couple of the other Berks County school districts that were impacted by that high school math proficiency challenge. And again, the impact varies depending on when students took the Keystone exam, how many students they had in those trigger courses during the 2019-20 school year. But you can see that there are many other districts across the county that were significantly impacted as well. Another thing that we wanted to just share with you a little bit is some PSSA data. So we're going to look at some overall data, but these slides here show cohorts. So basically, we have a program called Ed Insight that we're able to use to pull state assessment data and a variety of different data pieces for us. And we can look at all students, or we can kind of narrow down the pool a little bit. And so what I did here was I pulled the cohort of students who actually were here with us to take the PSSA multiple years in a row so that we can see how those same students performed year after year, discounting, students that have moved in or out of our district. So this is our current 5th graders. You can see here their 3rd and 4th grade data. It's a little bit hard to see with the reflection there, but the column all the way over on the right is the pass rate, and the green boxes there on the graphs represent that as well, the green bars. And so you can see that the proficiency numbers have increased there. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, but just wanted to show the different grade levels. So this is the current 6th grade. So it shows you the past 3 years since COVID and how those proficiency numbers have crept up. And our most recent year is the highest there. And then this is our current 7th graders. Again, our most recent assessment in 22-23 shows increased growth there. Same thing for our current 8th graders. So those are all the ELA PSSAs over the past couple of years, and those proficiency numbers, the pass rate is considered proficient or advanced on those. And then finally, the current 9th graders. So 8th grade last year was the last time that they took the PSSA, so you can see the same thing here for them as well. So in ELA, in English Language Arts, we see those bars growing, which is a positive thing. This shows you the comparison from our percent of proficient and advanced here in our district as compared to the state percentages for last year. And you will see here in the ELA, Boyertown's in pink, the state is in white. In 3rd and 4th grade, our percentage for ELA was slightly below the state average. And then once we hit 5th grade through 8th grade, we surpassed the state average. And we'll talk about that a little bit and some of the things that we're doing to try to continue to grow in those areas. Math, similarly, again, looking at those cohorts of students and comparing the past couple years since the pandemic when they took the PSSA, you can see this group, their bar is growing as well. This one, the most recent year, was slightly lower than the year before, but still continuing to show some gains. And then this group, our current 7th graders, made some significant gains in proficiency, almost 10%, if I'm looking at that correctly, from one year to the next, which is absolutely fantastic growth. And then the current 8th graders and the current 9th graders. And then we have the math results, again, similarly to what I showed you for ELA. We have Boyertown in pink and the state in white. And in math, we actually exceeded the state proficiency percentages in all grade levels. So that's some good news that we were higher than the state in all of those. And likewise for science, again, we only take that in 4th grade and 8th grade. But again, you can see that Boyertown surpassed the state proficiency percentages in both of those grade levels as well. What that report does not show is growth data. So the state tracks not only proficiency percentages, but also growth data, looking from previous assessments to the current assessment. And not only does that help us look at how our students are performing, but another piece that you may or may not be aware of is that our growth data, which is part of our building scores, also impacts evaluations for our staff. So teachers of tested subjects in grade 4 and above receive what's called a PVOS growth score that impacts their evaluation, providing that they teach a minimum number of students that's used to calculate that data. This growth score is a rolling 3-year average. And so if a teacher is teaching, say, 5th grade math, after 3 years in a row, their growth data is averaged together by the state, and they get a score that's included as part of their evaluation. Because of the pandemic, that PVOS growth data was paused because, again, nobody took the PSSA in 2020, so it interrupted that 3-year rolling average. So 2021, we had to start that PVOS process all over again. And again, this was across the whole state, not just Boyertown. So therefore, we've been getting growth data for our students the past couple years, but because none of our teachers have had a 3-year rolling average yet since the pandemic, it has not been included in teachers' evaluations for the past few years. But this year, 23-24, will be that 3rd year in a row now. So our teachers will be receiving growth data scores as part of their evaluations, starting with this school year again. That's also included in the PA Future Ready Index, and that building level growth data is used to determine building scores. So really all teachers and administrators are included in getting assessed on the growth that our students are achieving. I'm going to share with you now, just for a couple minutes, what the building scores look like. And again, this accounts for our student proficiency, our growth. It looks at things like attendance, it looks at graduation rates at the high school level, a number of things that kind of go into this score. So just wanted to share with you a little bit. You can see here, and interestingly, if you remember on the earlier slides, Earl Elementary did not necessarily have the highest proficiency numbers out of all of our elementary schools. But when you put together their growth and some of those other pieces, they actually had the highest building score of our 6 elementaries. One thing I will note, and Mr. Stout and I can both attest to this since we were both elementary principals here in our previous roles, these numbers for our 6 elementary schools are grouped much more tightly together than they were in the past. So we're seeing a lot more consistency across our buildings, which is a positive thing. The numbers in the middle represent the rankings of our schools. There are 54 elementary schools in Berks County. So our elementaries ranked from number 5 through number 21 in the county. And I also included there what the range of scores were. 48.4 was the lowest, 88.3 was the highest in the county. And you can see our scores were grouped from a 74.3 up to an 82.2. Here's one I'm excited about, having been at Middle School West last year. There are 24 middle schools in Berks County. Our two middle schools were ranked number 2 and number 4 in Berks County, and you can see their scores there, a 74.8 and 79.7, and you can see there the range for the 24 middle schools in Berks County. And then the high school had a 65.2, was 11th out of 18. And again, that was very much impacted by that algebra keystone situation that I explained to you a little bit earlier, and the varying impact depending on where schools have their students taking that algebra trigger course and what year that was for them for this current senior class. Just a couple key takeaways from this information. Our historical data is impacted by a couple things. Some of them are district specific and some of them really impact all schools. So obviously the impact of the pandemic was for everyone, and we're all still recovering from that situation. And then some changes to the graduation pathways with the Keystone exams at the high school level as well, in terms of the various pathways that students can take in addition to or in place of passing their Keystone exams. And then we also were impacted by right sizing moves. So that was a district specific one that also happened in the midst of the pandemic. So when we look at our elementary schools, for example, and look at their PSSA data from spring of 2019, the kids who were at Gilbertsville Elementary in 2019 are not necessarily the same students who were at Gilbertsville in 2021, because some of them are now at Boyertown Elementary or move various places in the district depending on where those lines were redrawn during that process. PDE website does include historical data from 2015 through the present. So I did include 2 links there for the historical PSSA data as well as Keystones, and this is available for all districts across the state of Pennsylvania. A couple other key takeaways. As I mentioned before, our ELA PSSA percentages are below the state average in grades 3 and 4, but then surpass the state average in grades 5 through 8. So there are definitely some things that we are doing to try to improve in that area. One is by providing structured literacy professional learning for our staff. That was included in the comprehensive plan that you had voted on earlier this year. We actually just had a professional learning day this past Friday, and we provided a structured literacy overview for all of our district staff at that day. And we also have been implementing some board-approved resources for phonics, phonemic awareness, and comprehension that are being incorporated to improve student learning. You might recall we did a UFly presentation earlier this year, Hegarty resources, I believe, last year. And so those are some pieces that we are implementing to help our students learn and grow as well as part of that structured literacy work that we're doing with our students. And that's a K-12 effort across all content areas, really. And then again, those average math and science PSSA results are all above the state average, but that doesn't mean we're satisfied or going to rest on our laurels. We still have room to grow, and we're actively addressing those challenges also through curriculum work that we're doing. As we've shared before, we're working on horizontal alignment this year to give opportunity for our teachers across buildings to come together and work with others within their same grade level to make sure that students are being provided with positive experiences in all of our classrooms to give them all opportunities to learn and grow. And we also, again, continued professional learning and the resources that we're providing for our teachers to help them with supporting our students' learning. A couple other high school pieces that I want to just briefly take you through. We had a presentation at the Berks County Curriculum Coordinators meeting about a month ago where a representative from the College Board joined us, and they shared pieces related to our SAT performance as well as our AP classes and exam participation. So on this slide here, on the left-hand side there, upper left-hand side, you see the overall SAT mean performance for Boyertown School District, where the English reading and writing was a 559, math a 570, and the overall total mean score for our district was an 1129. And then below that, the large blue numbers there are for all Berks IU students. And then underneath that, you see Pennsylvania all schools and United States all schools. And some more good news here, our district average SAT performance exceeds not only the county averages, but also the state and national averages. This shows some AP information, and I thought this was particularly interesting. So the dark blue represents the number of total AP exams that students in our school district took. The lighter blue, or the more royal blue, is the number of exams where students scored a 3, 4, or 5. Typically, 5 is the highest you can score. Typically, colleges will accept a 3, 4, or 5. Some schools will only accept a 4 or 5, but 3 or above is typically considered a good score or a strong score on the AP exams. So our total number of exams went down during those pandemic years, as seen by those dark blue bars, but it's starting to make a rebound. But the part that I thought was even more exciting here was when you look at the percentage of all the tests our students are taking, what percent of those tests resulted in a score of 3 or above, meaning our students are performing well. So pre-pandemic, that first set of bars there was 2019, 63.5% of our students scored a 3 or above. Our most recent data from this past year was 69% of those scores were a 3 or higher. So seeing some gains there as well, which is another positive. This breaks down the different AP exams that were taken last year during the 2023 school year. The 10 most popular ones are ranked there, and then the number of exams that were taken for each one is next to that. And then the color-coded bars show how our students performed. So the darkest blue is a 5, and then the medium blue is a 4, the lightest blue is a 3, and then the white and the gray are the 2s and the 1s. So you can see which exams our students had the highest level of success in terms of how they performed on these overall. This year, for the first time, the College Board instituted something called the AP School Honor Roll, and there are different levels for this honor roll, and this is where they recognize schools based on their AP participation as well as performance on the AP exams. They shared with us at this meeting that there were 4 Berks County districts out of the 18 that we have in the county that made the honor roll, and Boyertown was one of the 4. So we earned the bronze distinction. And what that means is there are 3 different areas that score is based on. The first one is college culture. That's the percentage of students in the graduating class who took an AP exam at any point in high school, regardless of how they scored on the exam. So you needed to have at least 40% of the students having taken an AP exam at some time during their high school career. College credit was another one. That's the percent of students in the graduating class who scored a 3 or higher on any AP exam in high school. They only had to have scored at least a 3 on one exam, regardless of how many they took in order to be included in that. And we needed to have at least 25% of our AP students hit that number. And then the last one is college optimization. And we needed to have at least 2% in this category for that bronze award. And that was the percent of students in the graduating class who took 5 or more AP exams in high school, where at least one exam was taken in their 9th or 10th grade year, with the thought being that if students start that process a little bit earlier, one, it gets them more interested in those AP courses, but also it helps reduce some of that pressure in their junior and senior year if they kind of spread out those exams a little bit over their school experience. So kudos to the high school for making that honor roll this year and earning that bronze award. So again, something for us to continue to aspire to and grow upon past success. Just a couple final thoughts. Overall, data is trending in a positive direction. There is certainly still work to be done, and we are doing that work every day, working together to support our students and continue to help them grow. Our teachers, support staff, administration, we are all continuing to grow and learn in order to support our ultimate vision, which is, of course, the success of our students and cultivating that exceptional, innovative learning community that enables all of our students to succeed in a changing world. And that's the end of our data presentation.
Excuse me. What are we going to do to bring our other students up to proficient? I mean, we've got to bring everybody up.
Absolutely.
So what are we going to be doing to help them?
So there are some pieces that are kind of across the board with some curriculum work that we're doing and professional development for our teachers. And then there's certainly those differentiation pieces. We have a number of tools at our disposal that can help us really identify and pinpoint individual student needs and really target their learning to address those individual needs. We have a variety of different classes that are available for students based on need as well. The high school definitely has a wide range of those, but elementary and middle school also. We have some specific courses that are designed for students who need a little bit of extra in order to help them learn and grow.
Is there also a possibility of after-school or study halls or something to
Yep,
help?
we have all of that. So we do have study halls at the middle school and the high school level. We have that flex still at the high school currently. We also do have after-school homework help. That's something that we've been using some of our ESSER funding to help support with. At the elementary and the middle school, we have after-school homework help throughout the year that students can stay and participate in. And then we're also continuing our summer intervention programs this year. So students are recommended for that by their teachers, by the reading specialists and the intervention staff to identify students that, perhaps don't have an IEP or, don't qualify for extended school year programs, but could use some extra learning and some extra support to help prevent them from sliding back over the summer. So we have that available as well.
What percent of students are taking advantage of this, and is it helping?
It certainly varies by building. With the after-school homework help, teachers can recommend students to participate that and work with families to get students involved. Students and families can also, request to stay after and participate in that. Some students come week after week, day after day, and other students come just when they have a specific need, something they need help with. So it kind of varies, but we have students at the different buildings that do participate in that, and oftentimes they are part of our intervention program, so we are monitoring their progress very closely.
And Mrs. Nyman, one of the things we were able to do with ESSER funds is provide transportation over the summer for kids to come to the program, because in the past, if parents aren't able to bring them to the program, that was kind of a big deal. So over the past couple years, we've been able to continue to do that.
Mrs. Scott?
So I'm looking, and I'm not picking on anything here, but I'm looking at the computer science class, which kids are usually pretty able to do well, but they really scored low there. Is there not that much interest in that class, or?
If I remember correctly, I believe we had 7 students take that exam last year. This year, because I know I looked at that with Mrs. Kratz as well, I think there are 17 students this year that are signed up for that AP course. We do have other computer science courses at the high school besides this one, but this is just the AP course in particular here. Sure. Mrs. Deeroff?
You gave us replacements for the various schools in Berks County. Did you ever take the 2 schools in Montgomery County and place them in Montgomery to see where they fall, because children will all be from Montgomery County?
We did not for this. We could certainly do that.
I'm just curious how we would place there.
Sure, I can get you that information if you're interested in seeing that.
Do we prioritize growth over actual scores? Sometimes when I'm looking at it and you're ranking the schools, it seems like it's more about growth than it is the actual scores that are coming in. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right. We definitely look at both. Obviously, we want our students to be performing at a proficient level, but that growth piece is really important, because when we have students who are struggling and have not reached those proficiency levels, we want to see that they're at least moving in that right direction, and that they are, growing at least a year's worth of growth, if not more, to try to get them up to speed with where we would hope they would be.
Growth is on both ends, though. So when we have students who are proficient, we also need to be looking at them to be growing to advance and beyond, because we get, our data
Absolutely.
is look or assessed that way as well. So just when we reach that one level, we need to continue to show that we're moving, that bar along.
And even for our students who are already advanced, some of you who have been on the board for a while may remember that years ago we had a cohort of administrators who participated in Learning Forward, and we did action planning projects at that time. I was at Gilbertsville Elementary at the time, and my action plan project was the students who were already advanced, and some of the things that we were doing to help them continue to grow even further, because sometimes they are the students that it's the most difficult for them to show growth. Any other questions? Mr.
Yeah, I
Updegrove?
have one. This This looks a lot better than what the Mercury had in. I don't know if you've seen what the Mercury had in, our scores. I mean, I had to hide from people when they read that. This looks a lot better, thank you.
Absolutely. And again, there's still room to grow. We still want to keep moving in a positive trajectory, but I think we're on the right track.
Well, I don't know where they get their scores from, that they were so super low.
I don't know which one you were looking at. I mean, the percentage numbers are the percentage numbers. So the Reading Eagle and the Mercury typically run the same articles. So I would assume it was the proficiency percentages that you were looking at. So yeah, and probably that 14.5% on the high school math that I was explaining to you, that would have been in that report in the Mercury as well.
Make sure you call the newspaper tonight. Fill in the new score.
Roger, you saw that article, was it just Montgomery County Schools or Berks?
Well, it didn't, you know, the Mercury had it in there. It could have been Berks County and Montgomery County, but it was super low. And it had in a lot of Montgomery County schools too, so. It was, I guess, a state proficiency rating overall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people like-
Right, which is what we had looked at, where third and fourth grade ELA was below the state average, but everything else was above. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Well, thank you very
All right.
much, Mrs. Landis.
Thank
Very
you.
nice presentation.
Mike, are you gonna
Yep, I'm bringing
advance?
it to you.
Okay. Okay, tonight I wanted to provide a finance presentation. For the existing board members and new board members, there's going to be a lot of information in here just in regards to proper accounting in the public sector versus private sector, where we're at from a financial perspective, the key factors that impact our budget, and then some key pointers on our preliminary 2024-25 budget and the things that we will be looking at to see how they develop from now through June when we would have to pass that budget. So it's a lot of information. There's nothing in this presentation that we will be voting on this evening. I would encourage everyone to, ask questions. If you look at this over the weekend, remainder of this week, have more questions, please ask and I'd be happy to answer. So today I'm going to talk about just a brief district overview. I'm going to provide a financial statement review. I'm going to talk about fund balance because we talk a lot about fund balance during the budget process, what it is, what it's not. I'm going to review what we have available in our capital reserve fund balance, projected future capital projects, which would come out of that capital reserve fund balance. I'm going to discuss the proposed turf fields and also the general fund balance. I'm also going to review our bond and debt obligations because I think it's important for everybody to recognize the debt that we have and how we're sustaining that debt. I will talk about the PSERS, the employer rate history and future projections for that retirement contribution that the district makes on behalf of employees. I will talk through the Act 1 index. That is the index that determines how much we may levy in a tax increase each year. And for the 2024-25 budget year, I will talk about some different real estate tax increase scenarios. Current budgeted revenues and expenditures, and there is a good bit of uncertainty there from both the revenue and expenditure side, so this will develop from now through June. Talk through the budget uncertainties and then some key budgetary dates. The district overview, we have 6 elementary schools which house 2,750 students, 2 middle schools which house 1,534 students, and 1 high school with 2,090 students. So as of October 1, the total students in our buildings is 6,374. We have additional students. We have 47 pre-K students, 360 students which are receiving homeschool education, and 65 students in our virtual academy. So total students educated, 6,846. This is a decrease from the October 1 of the prior year. October 1 is a state mandated reporting, so we always compare October 1 to October 1. Included in that 6,846 students is 1,549 special education students. Of that 1,549, 83 of those students receive services outside of the district. Of those 83 students, 7 of those students are placed outside of the district due to settlement agreements. From a staffing perspective, professional staff, we have 477.5 full-time equivalents. We have support staff of 168 individuals, 31 administrators, and 4 support supervisory employees. The other service providers that we rely on are Kelly Services, CRES, a number of mental health and special education support services, and then we also utilize some security services as well. So from a financial statement perspective, we will talk a lot about government funds, governmental funds, and I thought it was important to give, especially the new board members, an understanding of how a public school district reports versus how a private sector or for-profit entity would report their financial statements. So the district really has their year-end statements, which are presented by the auditors, which are called the government-wide statements. They more resemble what a for-profit entity would report as a balance sheet and an income statement. It takes into account the long-term impact of your capital assets. It starts depreciating those assets on those statements. It puts forth the full obligations of your debt. That's on the government-wide. What we talk about and what the PDE reporting is aligned with is what's called your governmental funds. That's our general fund, our capital reserve fund, our fiduciary funds, which are scholarship funds, or student activity funds, and then our food service fund, which operates solely on its own. So those are all the government funds. Those are the PD reporting is all based around that governmental fund reporting. So we would have our statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. That's part of our governmental funds. So it kind of tells you the difference. On a for-profit entity, you have a balance sheet and income statement. On a public sector entity, it's a little bit different, and there's different measurements on that government-wide versus the governmental funds. The governmental funds are really presented on that fiscal year basis. The current, thank you. The current resources that you're taking in, the revenues you're taking in, and then your current expenditures. It's not looking at the full impact of that long-term debt obligation that might be out 20 years. You're recognizing that on a fiscal year basis. So we talk a lot about fund balance, what it is. Fund balance is simply your assets minus your liabilities. That's fund balance. It is not necessarily extra cash. It is not an extra bank account. It is simply an accounting balancing item. Your assets have to equal your liabilities and equity. So assets minus liabilities equal your fund balance. The fund balance is the total accumulation of all your operating surpluses and deficits since the inception of the district. So you have an operating surplus when the revenues you took in were more than your expenditures for that year that you paid out. Likewise, you have an operating deficit if the revenues you take in are not enough to support those expenditures. In either of those events, if the cash you took in was more than your expenditures, then that's going to have a positive increase in your fund balance. When you have a deficit, what that means is you're utilizing resources that you might have taken in a prior year to meet the expenditures. So the cash we took in one year wasn't enough to meet the expenditures that we paid out, then we would have a deficit, and that's where you see use of fund balance. And again, the use of fund balance, what does it mean? It's just the revenue generated in the current year is less than the expenditures incurred. So I hope that kind of helps to, as we get into the budget, talk about fund balance and using fund balance, what that really means. As far as the regulations and guidelines surrounding fund balance, there are some guidelines within school code regulations that govern school districts, and then some operating guidelines that are out there in regards to school districts. So for the general fund, for the unassigned and undesignated fund balance, no more than 8% of our budgeted expenditures can be in that unassigned balance at the end of a year. The non-spendable, which has no limit, is really an accounting amount, and it relates to the inventory and prepaid expenses. The non-spendable is the exact amount equal to your inventory and prepaid expenses. You're assigned and committed. There's no limit on those balances. Those amounts are assigned or committed for future purposes, most notably for capital projects or future budgetary need. As far as the capital reserve, capital projects funds, there's no limit on what a school district can carry as far as balances in those funds. Those funds are used solely for capital projects of the district. Whether it be a roofing project, whether it be HVAC, they are not used to support the instruction of individual students. So they are separate funds from the general fund, solely for the purpose of either new construction, renovation, capital improvement, whatever we might need as far as our facilities. While there is no statutory guideline on what capital project or capital reserve balance a district should hold, there are some statistics out there from the National Center on Education Statistics and PASBO that maintain that the best practice is to maintain at least 2 to 4% of reconstruction costs within your capital projects, so you can be prepared when you need a roof replacement or you need an HVAC replacement or any other capital type project that you want to do to improve the district. So as far as the capital project reserve funds, when it comes to the 2 to 4% of reconstruction costs, which is the guideline, that reconstruction cost is based upon the current estimate of what it costs per square foot to build an elementary school building or school building. The current rate per J. Clough at KCBA is $390 per square foot. So applying that $390 per square foot along with the standard 10% contingency and 15% soft costs, the total cost to replace all of our buildings would be $584,285,325. Huge number. Obviously, it would have to be, detrimental if we had to replace all of them at once. That being said, the guideline is 2 to 4% of that reconstruction is what we should maintain in our capital projects to provide for the needs that our buildings will have in the future. So 4% of that would be $23,371,413, and we have roughly that within our capital projects balance currently. So we're within the guidelines of where we should be, based upon the statistical. And when we go through a bond call to talk about our credit rating, they will ask those questions. They will look at, what do we have as far as balance, what do we have in our general fund to make sure that we have sustainability within a fiscal process. As far as projected future capital projects, these would be the roofing and building related projects over the next, I would say, 4 to 5 years. We would be looking at New Hanover, Upper Frederick Elementary, replacement of a portion of the roof. That would be about $1.3 million. Boyertown Elementary may also need a roof replacement, which we are estimating at $4 million. Colebrookdale would have a section that would need to be replaced or improved, and that would be about $900,000. Earl Elementary would be $600,000, and then Middle School East would be another large roofing project at $3.6 million. The other projects that are on the horizon that we will need to be prepared to fund would be the Middle School East chiller replacement. That is $1,098,500. We will need to update at Boyertown Elementary the HVAC system. And then annually, we have other smaller capital projects that in any given fiscal year can range from a combined total of $300,000 to $500,000. So of that, over this next 5 to 6 years, there's about $13 to $14 million in projects that we could expect. Now, I will tell you that the DCED grant, the application is opening on March 1st. We may have the ability to receive some grant funds for these roofing projects or for the chiller replacement project. So we will be applying for that, and that can positively help us. There is another proposed capital project out there that the board has, the option to move forward with.
I have a question on this, please. There's been no movement on the turf fields or anything put to the board
No, this is
at
just
this
information.
point. But so my question is, why is this on a financial presentation that makes it appear that we've already decided that we're going to go forward on this?
We haven't
And I don't
decided anything.
I'm not very into that being part of the presentation. So my question is, what's the reasoning about including it in at this time among other projects that we're actually going to do?
Simply informational.
I don't, this is just me, I don't think that belongs here. I think that should have been a separate issue, as it's not, nothing's been decided at this point. So just my input on that?
So again, this is an informational presentation. So the board has previously been presented with two turf field proposals, so I've put those here so you can, look at everything in total. The stadium field is an estimated total cost of $3,239,140, and then Field 1, which is the current soccer and lacrosse field, is an estimated cost of $3,523,470. As far as our general fund balances, you can see that from 2015-16 through 2017-18, we were dropping a little bit. And then throughout 2018-19 forward, we've kind of created a little bit of increase in fund balance and kind of stayed within the 11 million, 10 million, 12 million, down to 11 million in our unassigned fund balance. As far as historical fund balances, historical performance, you will see in 2015-16, we had revenues of 104 million against expenditures of 106 million. So there was a decrease in fund balance of $2.2 million roughly. That continued through the 2017-18 year. Then beginning in 2018-19 forward, we started to see our fund balance increase a little bit. Our most recent year, 2022-23, which is currently being audited by our auditors, so these are unaudited numbers, but I don't expect much change from these. We had revenues of 139.6 million against expenditures of 138.4 million, so a positive increase in fund balance of $1.2 million. So creating some stability within the finances where they were going down for a number of years, but now they've maintained relatively on the uptick. There are many factors that have impacted during the pandemic, post-pandemic. There's been some expenditure savings that have not quite been beneficial for our students, meaning if we have substitute openings that we can't fill, that's not good for our students, but it saves us money. So there's been a myriad of factors that have impacted during the pandemic, post-pandemic, that I don't want to say skewed your expenditure numbers, but gave you savings on an expenditure side that maybe we didn't really want to see. So that's kind of portion of what's been impacting the ability to increase fund balance. The bond and debt obligations, we talk about refundings as they come up. I wanted to kind of give everybody just a picture of the debt that the district currently has. So we have the bond series of 2014, and that was utilized for capital improvements. We have the bond series of 2015, which was used for renovations and improvements at Bash, Middle School West, and other district properties. In the series of 2018, they were utilized to refund 2005 bonds and a portion of the 2014 bonds. We take advantage of refunding opportunities when our bonds become what's called callable, which means they are able to be refunded. We refund when we can generate cost savings for the district by refunding them at a lower rate. The series of 2019 was the Adam project, which was the athletic maintenance modernization and Title IX project. The series of 2019B refunded the remaining portion of 2012 and 2013 bonds. Series of 2020 refunded a portion of the 2014 and 2015 bonds. And most recently, our series of 2023 refunded a portion of the 2014 bonds, and the series of 2024 refunded a portion of the 2025 bonds. So as far as the individual bond issues, what's currently outstanding, you will see that the general obligation bond series of 2014 has payments of $5,369,297 remaining. The series of 2015 has $1,823,375 remaining, and then you can see each of the subsequent bond issues for total debt service through 2045 of $117,071,423. Of that, each year we're average about 6.4 million in actual principal and interest payments. One of the other factors that greatly impacts our budgets and our cost of carrying employees is the PSERS contribution rate for the district. Over the years, the employer contribution rate has continued to rise. In 2008 and 2009, it was a low of 4.76% that the district contributed for employee retirement. Most recently in 2023-24, it's 34% that we contribute. For 2024-25, it's forecast at 33.9%, and then projected in 25-26 at 34.72%. So we're not experiencing the significant increases that happened from like 2008-9 through 2021. It's kind of, the increases have leveled out, but it's still a large cost for the district. We pay in that rate on every dollar that we pay to eligible employees. What happens is the state reimburses us 50% of that. So you'll see a state funding number that is the retirement subsidy, but that retirement subsidy is only going to reimburse an expenditure that we already made. It's not dollars that are actually going to support the education of our students. I'm going to touch on Act 1. Act 1, again, is what limits the school district's ability to increase taxes without a voter referendum or other exception. Act 1 was established in June 26 and has been modified in subsequent years. You'll note that this year we again passed a resolution that said that we would not increase taxes above our adjusted index. And as the most recently reported 21-22 school year, 427 out of the 500 Pennsylvania school districts adopted what's called the Act 1 resolution, agreeing not to raise taxes above the district's individual index. So for 2024-25, Boyertown's adjusted index is 6.4%. The statewide base index is 5.3%. So what that means is we can, in our 2024-25 budget, not raise taxes above that 6.4%. The 2023-24 millage rate was 30.814 mils. The tax increase scenarios on what the millage rate and estimated real estate tax revenue would be. At a 0% increase, our real estate tax revenue would be about $84.2 million. At a 1% increase, it would be a millage rate of 31.122 mils, which would equate to about $85 million in real estate tax revenue. 2% would be 31.43 mils and would equate to about $85.8 million in revenue. All the way up to the index of 6.4% would be a mills of 32.786 with a real estate tax revenue of $89.6 million. The percentage increase and the impact that it would have annually on an individual taxpayer, a 1% increase would be a 0.308 millage increase, which on $100,000 of assessment equates to $30.80 for the year. A 3% millage increase would be 0.924 and would equate to $92.40 for the year. So those are the factors that are impacted by Act 1 and whatever ultimate increase or no increase would happen in the budget process. As far as the 2024-25 budget projection as it looks today, it includes total budgeted revenue of $143,533,592 against total expenditures of $144,509,358, which is a projected decrease in fund balance of just under $1 million. I'm going to talk on the next page about number of budgetary uncertainties. Within our revenue estimates includes the governor's proposed funding for the Boyertown Area School District. For regular education, he is proposing funding of $21,346,633, which is a $2.5 million increase over the current year. In special education, he is proposing $4,913,631, which is a $214,000 increase over 2023-24. So we, again, will need to wait to see how that develops within Harrisburg, and we will make appropriate adjustments as we get more information. The other budgetary uncertainty we have is charter school cost. One, how our enrollment may grow or decrease will positively or negatively impact, and there is some legislation floating out there that would provide for some relief on the cyber charter costs, which most of our students that are enrolled in an external school are in those cyber charter schools. So that would provide immediate budgetary relief if that legislation moves forward. Healthcare costs within our initial proposed 24-25 budget are budgeted at a 10% increase. We will be monitoring our claims throughout the coming months to determine if possibly we can see a little bit of a trend less than that 10%. And if we do see that, then we will adjust that expenditure line item down accordingly. The 2024-25 budget projection as it sits today currently provides for all the services that we have today. It does not eliminate any positions, and it fills all retirements of teachers that we have. So we will not be looking for any attritional savings in our retirements. It's maintaining what we currently have. I know there's a lot of things that I think a lot of our administrators, a lot of our board members may want to see, additional programs offered. And I wanted to provide just what the average annual cost of adding one teacher would be. With salary, benefits, which includes PSERS, healthcare, and FICA carrying costs, the average annual cost of adding one additional teacher is about $137,000. So as we get through the budget process, that's a number as we, if we would talk about additional teacher to alleviate class size, what that would be looking at to impact the budget.
Question for you. Can capital reserve funds be moved to the general fund?
They cannot be moved to the general fund. Capital reserve funds cannot be moved to the general fund. The 2024-25 key budgetary dates, we would need to adopt our proposed final budget by May 30th. I think we tentatively have it on our May 14th Committee of the Whole meeting agenda. And adopt the final budget by June 30th. We could do that either June 11th or June 25th. So between now and then, we'll have many, many discussions on budget, and we'll provide updates as to what's happening at the state level, what's happening from an expenditure standpoint, and get into the thick of it. That's it. So I know that was a lot of information. I hope it provided for the new board members some of what impacts our budgets and how the process goes, and for existing board members, just provide a little more information on everything that we deal with.
I have a question on, I was looking at the debt obligation, the bond and debt obligation. Am I reading that correctly? In 2037, we have to come up with a payment of $3 million?
So, and did you say 2037?
Yes.
So you'll see the final column, total debt service. In 2037, it's 6.3 million.
Right.
Which is roughly, less than what our debt service is going to be for the 23-24 year, which is 6.5 million.
But do we have to come up with a one lump sum payment of $3
These are
million?
broken up semi-annual, so they're in two separate tranches generally throughout the year.
But in the 1 year, do we have to pay, the way this is, $3 million?
In that year, we'd be paying, in 2037, 6.3 million, because that's the total for all the bond issues.
Where are we gonna get that money?
That's currently budgeted, so
We're paying that now.
We're paying that now.
I thought it was one more lump sum of $3 million.
No. So the
Okay,
way
'cause
our,
it has that 37, 38, and 39.
Our monthly mortgage payment is, our yearly mortgage
Mortgage
payment
payment
is
is-
$6.3 million a year.
Okay.
and that, so the way that PFM or bond advisors have structured our debt is that it remains like a constant, a relative constant, so you don't have big increases or big decreases. You can keep that line item relatively flat. So every year, we would be budgeting for that principal and interest payments.
Okay, thank you. That scared me.
We could
The
read,
6.3, actually, if your lump sum payment was $3 million, that would make you, that should make you happy.
No, well, for the next.
I mean, that's 50%.
Like a month, like, or a.
That's for the next 3 years I seen that. It's like, what?
Patty, doesn't that, but normally those school debt, we would renegotiate that loan, or
So if it's worth it, yes. As our bonds become callable, we can test the market and go out to market and see if the rates support refunding to get a lower interest rate and then some savings.
It depends what the insurance market, I mean, what the interest rate market would be under the circumstances. And if we all could predict that, I don't know if we'd be here this evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
the cyber charter costs, they're being capped at about half of what we're paying now, or is it, did I read, I may have read that wrong.
The number it's been floating around there, it's roughly maybe 50% of what we're currently
So
paying
I
roughly.
did read that,
On
correct.
average, yes, but, it remains to be seen if that, legislation.
The legislature hasn't passed it yet.
That's why I thought it was like Christmas coming out, I wasn't sure exactly.
Don't count on it,
No,
okay.
no. But I was just wondering if that was the actual number that they
Yes,
were floating.
it's 8,000 something.
8,000 versus our 15 and 16. How many do we have in the cyber charter?
I got the title.
It changes.
Every day.
Yeah, I want to say under 300 maybe, but I'd have to.
I'd like that amount of money back.
They also
It will help pay the $6.3 million per year bond indebtedness payment.
The lump sum.
they're also trying, Jim, they're also trying, I'm sorry, they're trying to cap
243
it
students in
also
external
underway
cyber.
at 8,000.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
They're trying to put a cap on it to
Yeah,
keep it.
Don is actually one of the ones that present.
Yeah, that's part of hers. Okay, that's good. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't read that incorrectly.
Okay, is there any pay raises in there considered for our custodial staff, since we seem to keep losing them? I know we've been interviewing again, but we gotta do something.
There are not increases to the starting salary rate. That's something that could be discussed at the board level, and then we would have to adjust the budget for that.
I think we need to start discussing that, since you can go to Walmart or McDonald's and get paid $15 an hour to start, which is more than what they're getting here. Second item that I'm concerned about is there's, on the future capital projects, there's no dollar amount there for the HVAC for Boyertown Elementary, and I'm hearing there's some major issues going on over there.
Mr. Shield is developing estimates for that. We don't have the final numbers for that. We do know what the middle school East chiller, cost us. We will be evaluating the Boyertown project to see if it would be eligible for the grant funding as well.
Okay, we really need to start looking at that, because I hear there's some major issues going on over there.
Nothing else? Thank you. That was the most in-depth report I've ever saw for finance.
Very good.
I hope it helped. It didn't confuse too
Yes,
much.
that was good.
When you guys have questions, please ask, and I'll try and limit the amount of jargon I use to get the understanding there. When you live it as long as I have, you just get so ingrained in the jargon, sometimes you have to take a step back and say, not everybody wants to work with numbers like I do.
All right, now for the moment that you've all been waiting for, the 16 policies to be reviewed this evening. They honestly, the first 12 are relatively simple. I'm going to start with policy 137, home education program updates. This includes policy 137, 137.1, 137.2, which is a brand new policy, and 137.3, which is also a new brand new policy. These are all policies that have to do with home education programs, and the policy language that was revised to reflect the need for additional record keeping based on new participation provisions for home education students, as well as including reference to the new policies. Additional policy language was added to clarify existing school code requirements for certifications submitted with the notarized affidavit, portfolio, and written evaluation provision programs determined to be out of compliance, and transfer letters. So as far as policy 137 is recommended for legal liability purposes, and Mr. Stout, are you able to get 137 highlighted? With respects to 137, there is no change to the policy. There's nothing that's being struck out. There is only bolded language that is being added for the reasons that I shared. So I'm not sure that you, can you blow that up just a little bit? Can you, there you go. If you scroll down under notarized affidavit, you'll see that it is bolded or before. where they put which contains certification that the supervisor of the home education program and all adults living in the home and persons having legal custody of a child or children in the home education program have not been convicted of criminal offenses enumerated in school code in accordance with law. The affidavit shall include all. So that's wordage that is being included. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see under student portfolio and evaluations, they have in accordance with applicable law. This is the biggest change that we're seeing in policies that's being added. That language is being added throughout, and it's recognizing that school code. And if you continue to scroll down, there was a few other words that were added under appropriate education compliance, that they have, that those two words, the superintendent, to, shall, to. And then under hearings, if a home education program has been determined to be out of compliance, the supervisor or spouse of the supervisor of the home education program is prohibited by law from supervising a home education. So that's the person who is really responsible for the home educator's education. And then they submit to us verifying that the students had met those obligations. And if the home education program is determined to be out of compliance, then that would be where this change would come in. And then if you just scroll down a little bit further, you can see that they added under the last paragraph, if the superintendent is informed of pending proceedings related to a home education program relocating from a previous district, obviously they added that, this in bold, the superintendent, and in the previous district. This has been reviewed, and we are good to move forward if everyone else feels as though we're okay. Any questions about 137? So 137.1 is extracurricular participation by home education students. And again, they've embedded it was updated for consistency with the new policy guides addressing participation in curricular activities, academic courses, and career and technical education programs. Policy language on posting of information regarding extracurricular activities, eligibility criteria, and dates and times of physical examinations on medical tests was updated for clarity in accordance with school code provisions. Overall, Policy 1371 is recommended for legal liability purposes. And again, Mr. Stout, if you scroll down, you can see that under guidelines, number 7 and 8 are highlighted. They updated those. Connections to school code, correct? That's what I'm referring properly. Verification may include but not limited to attendance records, weekly grades, or academic achievement, or other documents demonstrating completion of eligibility criteria. This is currently what we do within the public school setting, that in order for students to be eligible to participate in extracurricular activities, we have to verify that students are meeting academic standards and passing classes. And if you scroll down a little bit further to the second page, they've inserted administrative, conduct, and then under the delegation of responsibility, they added the superintendent, instead of just designee, shall post information regarding the availability of the district's extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletic programs, as well as a copy of this board policy on the district's publicly available website, and provide participation upon request by students enrolled to be home education program or their parents' guardians. And then you can see under the next level, eligibility criteria is added on the dates and times of physical examinations, medical tests. So all of the bold is the language that they're inserting in order to meet legal liability. Any concerns or questions about extracurricular participation by home education students? All right. Then moving to 137.2, participation in co-curricular activities and academic courses by home education students. This is a brand-new policy. We did not have this, and this policy is addressing the updated requirements of Section 1327.1 pertaining to participation by home education students in district co-curricular activities and academic courses. The policy states that students attending home education programs shall be given an equal opportunity to compete for positions and participate in district co-curricular activities and academic courses in accordance with board policy on the same basis as other students enrolled full-time in the district. It outlines the conditions for eligibility and participation, addresses transportation, and includes optional language to establish limits on participation in academic courses up to one quarter of the academic day for full district students, and prioritization for enrollment in designated activities and programs in accordance with law. This policy is mandated based on school code section 1327.1, requiring districts to develop policies and procedures. And then policy 137.3, participation in career and technical education programs by home education students, is also a brand new policy that I'm going to be looking for to move forward. This is a new policy guide addressing the updated requirements of section 13271 pertaining to participation by home education students in career and technical education programs that are either at an area career and technology center in which the district participates or district operated career and technical education programs or centers. Policy states that students attending home education programs shall be given an equal opportunity to apply for participation in career and technical education programs in accordance with board policy on the same basis as other students enrolled full-time in the district. It outlines the conditions for eligibility and participation, addresses transportation, and includes optional language to establish prioritization procedures for enrollment in career and technical education programs with limited seat allocation provisions in accordance with law. And again, this is a mandated policy based on school code section 1327.1, requiring district to develop policies and procedures. So we're just going to look at these four policies. Is everyone okay with me moving these forward to the first reading at our school board meeting? So just nodding would be great. All right, perfect. Then we will move those forward. The next policies are Policy 200, enrollment of students, Policy 202, eligibility of non-resident students, Policy 204, attendance, Policy 217, graduation, Policy 221, dress and grooming, Policy 233, suspension and expulsion, and Policy 810, transportation. These policies are being recommended by PSBA to be updated for legal liability and are mandated policies. The language change in each of these policies is to address students specifically experiencing foster care and other forms of educational instability. That's what you will see in bold. If you scroll down on that policy, Mr. Stout, you will see in each of those policies that I just read that they have inserted that language. Let me see. So if I start with Policy 200, is that what you?
You went pretty fast.
That's okay. I was only looking, I was going to start with 200. So what what is being included is, as I shared, and you can see as you scroll down a little bit, Mr. Stout, keep going under guidelines. You will see in bold writing that this policy now, they have inserted experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other forms of educational instability in accordance with board policy, law, and regulations. And that is the language that is embedded in all of those policies, but I'll be happy to show you each of them if anyone has any questions, specifically. So that's, anyone have a problem with 200? Nothing else is changing other than embedding that language. And we can look at 202, eligibility of non-resident students. We spent a lot of time on this policy previously, and I did not make any changes to our current policy other than upgrading the language that is being proposed in Policy 202. And that is that this policy was updated to expand requirements for immediate admittance to include students experiencing foster care and other forms of educational instability. So if you're a student and you are coming here, we are going to admit you as soon as possible. There's not going to be any delays. Our priority is to educate these students and making sure that they're in an educational institution. So again, the only language that has changed is with respects to students who are experiencing foster care and other forms of educational instability. And then they go into more in-depth explanation in this policy. Students experiencing educational instability, they define it. They talk about a student eligible for attendance whose parent guardian has executed a contract to buy, build, or rent a residence in the district for occupancy, may be enrolled with payment of tuition. Parent guardians of students who claim admission on the basis of future residency shall be required to demonstrate proof of anticipated residency. Former residents, we had calculated all of that information out in the past. That remains the same. And, yeah. This one, again, is reflecting the foster care or forms of educational instability. Any questions on Policy 202?
Does this allow, do we give or grant privileges of immigrants, illegal immigrants, to be able to go to our school? If they, does this, do we have to, do any of these policies that the state rewrote force us or mandate us to take in students that are not American citizens? Let's put it that way.
The answer is, we are required the answer is under the McKinney-Vento federal law, we are already required to take in homeless students who may not meet all of the immigration requirements. And there's also a United States Supreme Court case in Plyler versus Doe many years ago that required that we may need to do that. So this does not amplify existing requirements regarding students who are homeless or of immigration status. Yes.
It's more for curiosity than anything. It's just the resident-student part where they're talking about people who are splitting custody.
Yes.
On the 50%. How are you establishing that? Is that just going to be like, hey, yeah, my kids would make 50% of the time, or are you going to go off of court documents saying that this person
Usually
is
it's on a custody agreement
so
and a
it's gonna
court
be-
document.
It's gonna be, okay, all right.
Yes,
That's what I was curious about.
and in an earlier life in this district, when your superintendent was more in charge of that, we have had many discussions regarding the provisions in such custody agreements.
All right, so any concerns about Policy 202? And that one will be moving forward. 204, Mr. Stout, is the next, and that is on attendance. This is a mandated policy. This policy was updated to remove the brackets indicating optional language for absences related to other urgent reasons, making the statement a standard part of the policy. The statement also now expands other urgent reasons to include circumstances related to foster care and other forms of educational instability, in addition to homelessness. The policy content related to compulsory school age has been updated by removing the transitional provision to the current compulsory school age requirements. Sorry, I've got to go on to my next page. All right, so looking at Policy 204, Again, the compulsory age had changed. It has changed from, it is 6 and 18, and we had actually adjusted that before. But again, the other language that was inserted is capitalized. I want to say we always had habitually truant, that was always there, person and parental relation. So if you scroll to the next page, page 2 of 8, school-based or community-based attendance improvement program shall mean a program designed to improve school attendance by seeking to identify. So that is new. The delegation of responsibility, it will fall to the superintendent. The superintendent shall require the signature of the person in parental relation confirming that the policy has been reviewed. This is not a change. And looking down further, as I'm scrolling all the way down, Mr. Stout, I'm used to telling some gentleman to do something. Page 4, you can see that we have, they have inserted foster care and other forms of educational instability under number 13. And all of the different school codes have been updated. And that was it. There's only a few insertions of that language. The rest of the policy is unchanged. Yes?
Is there a number of days that are considered unexcused if a parent takes a family member on a family trip?
There is a family trip form, and then they can be an excused absence, providing that it's not longer than typically 5 to 7 days. When it gets much longer than, and people want to leave for a month, we then might require that family to pull their students out of school and re-enroll somewhere else, because that would be, an amount of days that would not be acceptable to be, absent. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, moving on to policy 217, graduation. This policy, again, is in reference to, nope, that we're not there yet. Policy 217, graduation. This policy was updated again to include the provisions of 24 Public School Section 1-121 regarding graduation requirements and annual reporting of graduation information and data. The policy also now includes the requirement to post graduation requirements on the school's publicly accessible website in accordance with, again, 24 PS Section 5-510-2. A section was added to the policy to address supports provided through for graduation of students experiencing educational instability. This policy is recommended for legal liability purposes. This is different than policy 214, which is also on for review tonight. But 217 is only to discuss the insertion of those language about foster care and educational instability. And I believe Mr. Stout has that up. Again, you can see the words that was inserted that are in bold. Other than that, there are no changes to our current policy. And there's a little bit on the third page. All right. Any questions? Okay. Policy 221, dress and grooming. Again, this falls into the same area. They're all being, all addressing students experiencing homelessness and foster care. In Policy 221, dress and grooming, a statement directing staff to waive penalties related to a delay in student compliance with board policy and school rules for dress and grooming due to a student's educational instability has been added to this policy. A reference to Policy 251, students experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other educational instability has been added to the policy. The policy has also been revised to remove terms such as neatness, cleanliness, propriety, modesty, and good sense regarding staff attire and appearance. The statement now directs staff to set a positive example through compliance with board policy and school rules related to dress and grooming. This is also a mandated policy. I think that the summary, yes, Mrs. Deeroff.
Does that mean the language you took out we could not have in?
I did not remove, I'm sorry, the language that was removed such as they,
The cleanliness part?
right, where we had as neatness, cleanliness, proprietary,
You took that out.
modesty, yes, that was removed.
Have to take it out.
That was the recommendation, yes, I believe in order to be in compliance with this mandated policy, because it puts, students who are in foster care or having other educational instability, it's putting them, they may not be able to be as neat as people who have, the comforts of a home. Some children may be living, even though they're in foster care, it might not be great, or they may not be in foster care and they could be living in a homeless type of situation. So it's to, really be sensitive to students who are having those challenges.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yes. Miss,
So, I struggle with that because that will affect the whole student body. If we pull out, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but isn't that something we can just handle with the students that are struggling? I know that you have mentioned before that sometimes the teachers have things, and I'm not trying to put on, but we have things available for them if they do come in, and it's really, sometimes if a student comes in and they're not clean or they're really disheveled, we're doing them more of a service because they're going to be picked on by other students if we don't help them. If we just allow uncleanliness and allow our students to be disheveled, then we create an atmosphere for the entire body. So is this Pennsylvania School Code, or is this something that PSBA is recommending to just pretty much wipe out our dress code? And that's what I'm viewing it as. You're just pretty much saying, whatever. You can wear whatever.
I would have to ask Mr. Sultanic if it is really school code, but before I do that, I do want to be very sensitive about the fact that we want students to come to school. And if they are disheveled, we don't want to point that out as a weakness in them accessing their education. We want to educate them in any way that we can, and not in every circumstance do we have the ability to provide them with extra clothing. At the elementary, it may be a little bit more available, but I can't say at the secondary level that, school nurses or that our nurse offices or our counseling rooms or any other area would we have excess of clothing. We do have money allocated through our homeless students and through Title I, but not enough to be able to, make sure that a student had good clothing every day. And depending on what their living circumstances are, some students are doubled up. They're living on, they're couch hopping. They might be going from home to home. Somebody may not be taking care of their clothing. So to us, it's more important to not mandate that and to have them in our schools to be able to educate. It's a very small population of students that I think that this would impact.
Ms. Torsha,
But-
if you could go down to the bottom of this policy and to the footnote number 3. Okay. Okay. Usually those are the references. So footnote number 3 refers us back to policy 251. Now, I believe that what this is aimed toward is that some districts have used clothing as a backdoor discriminatory issue toward individuals who may be in protected classes, who may be in poverty, and it may be tied to race and other discriminatory activities, which is why I believe that language was inserted as part of the process, to protect the district from uniformly establishing the policy. Now, if a child, and I understand your concern about whether this policy is going to ultimately be enforceable if we allow exceptions for individuals who are going through economic or poverty-related issues, it would seem to me in the administration, the teachers and the staff will know whether that's a genuine argument or not, and be able to address this, forgive the analogy, with a scalpel in a, in a narrow sense versus students all of a sudden raising financial instability as an issue.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how is it being handled now? Because obviously, you know,
This must have
this
happened.
is something that we've been handling without this being in a policy.
Yes.
We've been handling it.
If a large cohort of students in the 11th grade all of a sudden plead poverty in order to address dress code issues, I am sure that the administration will view that excuse with a little bit of circumspect investigation.
Yes, and I recognize that dress code is probably the least favorite thing that anyone wants to go there with, really, because everybody looks at it differently, and teachers don't really want to deal with dress code issues, especially male teachers. So I understand that. I understand that it's just difficult. It's a difficult situation. I just wanted to, get some ideas. Thank you.
Should we be reviewing the dress code policy? It would seem to tie into the two to make it more understandable.
I believe that when we're talking about this policy, specifically the way that they are trying, and this is the dress code policy technically, I mean, it is dress and grooming, so this is the policy. So within it, we're just trying to establish that we understand that there is a population of students who may have challenges with their apparel, and getting them to school is the most important thing. Educating students and giving them an opportunity to be educated is really our priority. And we're going to support them and help them any way we can, because there's no student that wants to come to school not clean, not groomed, not dressed. And, the best thing for us to do is to have them in front of us, not to make them feel badly, but to be able to work together. And as our teachers always do, we rally and we find donations and we help the students along. So
the student handbook that has a dress code in, the students have that and they know, and that's what we
Correct.
basically go by.
That's the guide. That's the
Correct.
guideline
Guideline.
enforces on a daily
Okay.
basis on how the I'm quite sure that the teachers do not read this policy on a
Yeah,
regular basis.
would be a difficult one to enforce, honestly.
Yeah, that was pretty much my question. Yeah, my comment.
So this is totally different than our normal dress code for kids.
this policy is our dress and grooming policy, period. What this is stating is that any student, they're trying to identify students who may be in a foster care situation or experiencing any kind of educational instability, that we're not going to make students feel uncomfortable or badly because they have wrinkled clothing, or their clothing might be soiled, or they're, wearing pajama pants as a result of that's what they can get, a hold of,
But we're still gonna enforce our normal policy of, okay, then second thing is, if they're.
Well, let me clarify.
But that's not
this.
part of this. That
Okay,
policy is period.
Let me clarify this. Let me do this on a national concept and bring it down to a school district. On a national concept, Congress passes legislation. Legislation's often broad and doesn't deal with the specific issues. So if the tax code is revised, the tax code, it doesn't contain in the legislation all of the gruesome details of the tax code revisions. It has overall policy, overall changes, overall definitions of what can be deducted and what can't be. It charges the responsibility to the Internal Revenue Service to adopt thousands of pages of regulations to deal with what happens on your tax return. This is your legislation. You, as the legislative body, you're passing the policy, and as a general principle, you're saying, in the enforcement of this policy, we need to take into account somebody who may have particular financial needs. But ultimately, the day-to-day dress code is not this document. It's in the student code of student code of conduct that is adopted, and in the student handbook, which is enforceable under section 510 of the school code. So I just want to distinguish between the two, and I think Ms. Scott mentioned that that's the student code of conduct addresses the specifics of not allowing the example of pajama pants or some other examples. If a indigent child comes to school because they can't afford anything else other than pajamas, what this says is we're not going to throw the book at that child.
And that I understand.
And if you would, you'll probably be reading about yourself in the Mercury again. Okay.
Okay,
And not
that-
about scores.
Then my other part would be, if a child does come in and is that badly soiled that it could be healthful or harmful to another person's health, what would we do?
We always encourage the access of our nursing staff, or if we're in a secondary level where there's locker room facility, we give the opportunity for shower, opportunity to be clean. We, if we have a change of clothing, we launder clothing. We utilize the resources that we have and try to support the students and make sure that they're feeling, better.
I just didn't
Yep.
want to be harmful to other students.
Right. We certainly try to, we offer.
That doesn't supersede the section where it says that if anything becomes disruptive for educational programs in the school or constitutes health or safety, that person, I assume, would be removed regardless of, because that's what it says in the policy right above it.
Right.
And this seems more like a discretionary thing. It's up to the discretion of the individuals. Why is this even being put in a policy if it's discretionary? Isn't this why?
Well, I think it's to reflect the intent to deal with that
Right.
particular issue.
Popularity.
No more, no less.
Right.
That we don't want our professional staff to make decisions on a discretionary basis that could later be construed as discriminatory against a protected class.
And the protected class is people that we're saying are educational and disability. Would it be better than that where you start actually putting in what that is?
The answer is no, because then if you start linking inappropriate things, race is not always bluntly.
I would never put down race as being educational instability. That's
No, that would be discriminatory unto itself.
Yeah, so-
But the issue is we're taking a non-discriminatory word and using it
it's just very
to
broad.
protect us from somebody or the allegation that we are making decisions on that basis.
Okay.
This is a protective measure more than anything else.
Correct.
And probably logical.
Policy 233, suspension and expulsion. Under policy 233, suspension and expulsion, the compulsory school age revisions are located under the section regarding attendance, schoolwork, After expulsion section in the policy, a reference to policy 113.4, confidentiality of special education student information, was added under the delegation of responsibility section. This addresses disciplinary suspension records. Additional minor revisions were made throughout the policy. Policy 233 is recommended for legal liability. And if you do have policy 233 there, sorry, I'm trying to make my own. You can see the insertion of small words like the student and referencing there. Superintendent or designee was added in this policy. And again, exclusion from class and school suspension, they included the student. Under expulsion, they use the word expulsion as exclusion. All the X's are things that we already have in our existing policy. And as you scroll down to page 3, they inserted the words the student. At the bottom of page 3, they inserted the word their, normal class. Students who are under 18 years of age for attendance and schoolwork was added. And then that's the extent of the changes to that policy. Any questions about 233? All right, and then the last of this group is policy 810, transportation. And policy 810, the only changes in policy 810, transportation, are updates pertaining to policy references. The statement regarding the provision of transportation for children in foster care now has a reference to policy 251, students experiencing homelessness, foster care, and other educational instability, in place of the reference to policy 255, educational stability for children in foster care, and a reference to policy 103.1, non-discrimination. Qualified students with disabilities has been added to the paragraph under the student health information section of the policy, which refers to student health and medical information being provided to school bus vehicle drivers when required by a student's individualized education program, or section 504. This too is a mandated policy. And as we look at policy 810, apologize, I'm catching up. The references are the numbers in blue and black, bold, and then they are listed at the bottom of the page where it references all the legal information. Those are the changes within this policy.
Mrs. Torsha, before you move on, 216.1,
Yep.
I was trying to take notes. I don't know if you
No,
covered.
216.1 we didn't review yet.
Okay.
Yes. So now we will go to 216.1. This is a brand new policy that's being recommended. This is supplemental discipline records. This is brand new. And this policy is based upon revisions on 237 PA Code Rule 163. Release of information to school. The juvenile probation office is required to provide notice to the building principal or his or her designee upon finding a juvenile who is enrolled in the school entity to be delinquent. The rule addresses the requirements for the following: the information to be contained in the notice to the school, acknowledgement of the notice of information, procedures for transfer of information upon the student's transfer to another school, maintenance of the information separately from juvenile's official school record, and the limited purposes for which the district can use the information. Policy 216.1 is recommended for legal liability purposes regarding adherence to rules regarding supplemental discipline records. Again, this is brand new. This does help us with having information when we do get new students. The more information we have about students, the better off we are to prepare for their entrance into our school building. And in some circumstances, some students may not be coming from a public setting. They may be coming from an alternative setting, and we should be able to have that information to make sure that we're programming for new students appropriately. All right, so that is 12 of the policies, and they will all be moving to first reading. I have 4 additional policies to review that the policy chairs and myself have discussed. The first one is policy 214, and that is a policy that was recommended by our school board members with respects to class rank. And looking at policy 214, what was done was all of the language that was added with respects to beginning with the class of 2025 and referencing the oh my goodness, the Greek model, is that right? Of summa cum laude, we had removed all of that, and we will be reverting back to the original policy, which is much briefer. It really is the beginning part of this policy that you can see under purpose and authority. And then if you scroll down to the second page, and then the delegation of responsibility, that's what the policy looked like prior to the change. So we are completely reverting it back to the retired policy so that we are continuing to move forward with a valedictorian and salutatorian. That was never outlined in the policy. It was just automatically assumed until we removed it. So if everyone's okay with 214 going back to the way it was, we will push that to forward for a first reading. And then we.
One thing, so now that that's salutatorian and valedictorian was never
Right.
laid out, is not now. Can we just ignore that in the future because it's it's not outlined? Not that we would, I'm just saying, is that possible?
Anything's possible.
So-
My understanding of how things work, but I'm not sure how we would want to word it. I believe that this policy is very consistent across other school districts. There's not, but I can certainly look between now and next week to see if there is a way to, to make sure that we're, putting that in. But I think as long as we're not using any other method of identifying, students who are performing at the top of their class, that is, automatically.
As long as we're not mandating something else.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I think if we try to put it in there and then all of a sudden it kind of almost forces the first and second highest student to say, to speak, but it does, but to say change the policy for it, if number one doesn't want to speak, to go down, but it's, because that's what was the reason we originally changed this, because the quote pressure on these students, but I think if we go back to what we had, there should be an issue.
It's just that I think number one and number two should get.
Yeah,
should be
first
used,
shot,
and they
yeah.
should be first shot.
Yep.
If they don't want it, I mean, that's okay.
Yep, high school will proceed with that as they have always done with respects to those students who are, achieving at the top. Yeah, sure. Policy 10. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs.
That's
Craig.
okay. Yeah, I think if I've never known anyone that didn't want to speak, I was always suspect of that reasoning. But anyway, I feel like if one or two doesn't want to speak, that instead of just saying that's okay, I think they should be provided with support and encouragement, because if they have that opportunity and they decline it, they might regret that for the rest of their lives. So, what?
They are encouraged to speak.
Yeah.
I don't imagine that there's not supports put into place, but there could be a situation where someone really is anxious but yeah, I think we would have to cross that if and when we came to it, and certainly do support those students, because I agree with you. It's an honor. It's a huge honor. Yeah. Thank you. All right, 105.2, Mr. Stout, is the next one. And that is exemption from instruction. And within 105.2, we were looking at, trying to expand a little bit more with regards to under the authority, with regards to conflicts with either ethical or moral, but that was referred back to us that that's not something that is in school code, that it should remain with religious belief. Under guidelines, we're looking to embed that the district shall excuse any student from specific instruction in accordance with law. Specific instruction is not restricted to the classroom and also includes instruction provided at assemblies. Exemption from specific instruction shall be said subject to the following. So that language we just bolstered up a little bit more so that people understood, that they're not required to stay in a classroom where they, may, just not be interested in what is being, presented. Number one, there was no changes. Under number two, the written request to be excused shall be sent by a parent guardian to the building administrator or teacher. We've added both. That should be included. I'm sorry, that should read and. That should read and. All right, not or. And then furthermore, we just, continued to include administration next to school principal. And we added copy submitted to the teacher, applicable from whose instruction the student to be excused. So we got rid of applies and added applicable. Under 3, it shall not be the responsibility of the district or any of its employees to ensure that the student exercises his or her right to be excused in accordance with a parental request. It shall be the responsibility of the teacher to discreetly request the student to leave. The student should, be doing this on their own, but we do want to be able to provide a prompt when necessary. And then scrolling down a little bit further, number 4, we're looking to try to be a little bit more elaborate with respects to family values, but that was recommended to stay with religious beliefs. And then again, the building administration added. So not a lot of changes, just really more to answer some questions and be able to elaborate.
Okay, why is the letter put in their permanent file?
A letter put in their permanent file. A letter would be placed in their file so that we were aware that they were excused from a certain subject so that it can follow with them. It's not disciplinary in any way. It's really just a record to keep on file. Sometimes parents do want to have something like they know. They'll say, to us, well, it should be in my child's file. You should know. It's a way of referencing.
So it's a reference, because what I'm looking at is, the letter follows the student all the way through school. Once it's attached to the permanent records. So I'm kind of sensitive to what goes into a student's permanent record.
By permanent, it really means as that record follows that student through just school. It's not something that would be shared beyond that. It's just a piece of the record that we would reference. I'm not sure how else to explain it.
Well, it's also to reflect in the record, so to speak, that child was excused from participation in that particular course. So it's documented so that somebody can later say, well, you never participated in that. What happened there? And at least you have, I think it's more protective for the family to have that in the file versus not in the file.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't looked at as detrimental to the student at all. Like Mr. Sultanic was saying, it is reflective to be able to demonstrate that. Yeah.
It's just, when you start putting something in the permanent file, because somebody else can look at it, it could be held against the student at a later date.
Oh.
I hate to say that goes on, but it very well could. And just wondering if one side balances out the other.
Right.
So it sounds to me like.
If it was an excused absence and somebody held it against the student or the family, that would be actionable, in my opinion.
Okay.
And any, okay. All right, next policy for discussion is policy 006.1, Mr. Stout. All right. Under 006.1, under guidelines, the recommendation is was to strike out if the school director can hear everything said at the meeting and/or those meetings, and all those attending the meeting can hear anything said by the school director and other participants addressing the board. Strike that out and include when the conversations and discussions between the board member and the board and participants can be heard clearly throughout the meeting. So under this guideline, it's more about the electronic communications shall be considered present only if the conversations and discussions between the board member and the board and participants can be heard clearly throughout the meeting. Little more direct. Also, we're striking out a majority of school directors shall be physically present at a board meeting when a school director attends through electronic communications. This is so that,
You can do a Zoom.
yes, correct. Under to attend a board meeting through electronic communications, the school director shall comply with the following: provide at least 4 hours or more advance notice to the board secretary. This was reduced from 8 hours to be able to give someone a shorter amount of time to be able to share that they may not be able to be there. And then under emergency conditions, information in the event that the county, state, or federal public health authorities, the governor, or any similar authority with appropriate jurisdiction declares an emergency condition that prevents or discourages public gatherings due to a public health and safety concern, or significant weather events such as snow, ice, or flooding creating dangerous road conditions as stated by local and state road authorities, PennDOT. So this is for us to be able to transition to a Zoom meeting in the event that it wouldn't be practical to hold a meeting in person. Those are the recommended changes to policy 006.1, attendance at meetings via electronic communications.
If you're having, excuse me, snow emergency or ice or flooding, there's a good chance there's going to be people without power. So if, just say we were supposed to meet tonight and I had no power at home and we were doing it by Zoom or whatever, how would that be fair to me if I didn't have power to participate?
I don't disagree with you. And under those circumstances, we would have to evaluate based upon, what the whole circumstances are. Last week, we were supposed to be meeting and we found that there were multiple power outages. So it was determined that we were going to postpone the meeting in its entirety. But there are some times where some of you may live at different areas where it's downpouring or there's some type of weather that is not really allowing you to get here access, but then it could allow, multiple people to be able to participate via Zoom so that we are able to have everybody be, present.
Is that going to limit the amount of people that can be by Zoom also then?
I don't believe so, no. As far as this is, I believe that's 903. No, that's this policy. Mrs. Scott, do you recall?
The answer to the question, it could
Yeah.
limit people who would be available for Zoom.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if we had a public meeting today and one portion of the school district, was having flooding or something like that, before the Zoom, that would arguably impede their ability to participate in this meeting. Our sole obligation legally is to advertise and make it a public meeting, and you're weighing all of those issues when you make a Zoom decision or a live public decision all the time.
And past practice of past boards for the 10 years I've been on here consecutively has been if there's no school, there's no after-school activities, and if it's a board meeting night, there's no board meeting. That has been past practice for the last 10 years.
Past practice is not binding on a school board. It only becomes binding if it becomes part of your policy. So if you can convince 4 other people to include this into your policy, then you could include that into your policy.
When you, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, a lot of times when the kids are out with snow, by the afternoon, it starts to clear up. So I think having a meeting at night, and I wouldn't wanna put it in the policy, you just have to kind of play it by ear and use common sense, you know. But if it's clear, I think that the board is pretty practical with when they hold a meeting and when we don't, when we do Zoom and when we don't. The reason to go to Zoom is for the benefit of board members, and I've been on a phone call, so I can't hear what's going on. And the phone call is okay, but it's not fair to the person that's trying to talk. We can't hear them, they can't hear us, and that's kind of that's not fair. We want to be able to hear the person that's on the phone, and as much as they want to be able to hear us. So something gets lost in that meeting, and I think to keep the professional edge, if we can't make a meeting, we should at least just Zoom. You know, even if you don't, I understand you don't want your picture up there the whole time because that gets a little, you know, but at least be on the Zoom because then you can hear everything and we can hear you. That was really the purpose.
You can't always hear on Zoom either.
I've never had a problem on Zoom.
I just wanted to say, I think that policy of 6 should be called Ruthie's policy, because you're gonna cut me off all the time. I don't know what's wrong with their IT department, what's wrong with their equipment, we've got all new equipment, but you claim you can't hear me, and I definitely don't hear you, it's all jumbled and mumbled. And the last meeting that I was not at was a flood, and I could not get out. I tried to, I called right away, well, it was too late for Zoom, it was too late for anything. This policy here is going to restrict me from not being able to call in. If a catastrophe happens, which did that night, I couldn't ask for, well, I could ask for Zoom, but I couldn't get it. So I don't think it's right to put a policy out like Mrs. Scott said. You're stopping some people from participating.
I was under the understanding that Zoom wouldn't take that long to hook up a connection for that. That was the first thing I checked. Does it take a long time to do this, or is this something the school can, you know, go to right away and get it done? And that was my understanding. Is that incorrect?
No, that's not incorrect. It's relatively simple to send out a Zoom link.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess the one about physically present, I didn't understand why that was in there in the first place. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The 4 hours, that would, I understand you'd be looking for time to set up electronic equipment to make that happen should you need to call in, and I'm okay with that. However, the part about cutting someone off if you can't hear them is you're asking me to approve discretionary authority to say, okay, this person, I can't hear them well enough, so they're off. And that to me is discretionary and not really the right way to do it. I can't agree to that in the way it's worded. So I won't vote to move this forward.
Yeah, I get that.
If-
I'm sorry.
If somebody can't be heard, or if they're dropped off of Zoom, or if they're dropped off of a phone call, then if they were part of the meeting should be stopped at that point. I mean,
Or
that's only fair.
Right. The way that the current policy read is that if the school director can hear everything said at the meeting and all those attending the meeting can hear everything said by that school director and other participants addressing the board, then they're determined to be present. So that is currently in the policy, that you need to be heard and that you need to be able to be connected throughout the entire board meeting. That is the way that your policy is reading now. What is being proposed is that it's a little bit more condensed, that when the conversations and discussions between the board member and the board and participants can be heard clearly throughout the meeting. It's just pretty much saying that in order for you to be in attendance, you need to be heard and people need to be hearing you. Just stating the
What about if somebody's dropped from the conversation?
Then my understanding is that you're not present for the
Yeah,
board
you're
meeting.
not deemed to be present. I think the real difficulty on this issue is that we could probably come up with 500 different permutations on this issue. And it may be dictated by, if this was June 30th and it was the last day for us to adopt the budget, or if it was a budgetary deadline, or if we had a bond issue proposal where we got a refinancing opportunity where we could lower our monthly mortgage payment from $6,300,000 to $5 million a year, and we lose that opportunity, I think the willingness of the board to deal with that will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I think the real difficulty is, yes, you're correct, that we could think of a lot of issues where somebody's going to be prevented from potentially participating, but if it's a major issue that we need to do that, I don't believe the policy should stop us from conducting a meeting and losing an economic opportunity or meeting a statutory deadline. And that's part of the difficulty in addressing all of these permutations.
Can I also add, there may be an option that we evaluate a conference room phone. A conference room phone may establish the ability for somebody to call in, for them to be heard, and for us to be heard. We would obviously have to test that out, but one of those
Yeah,
round-looking things,
Yes.
that might be a potential
Use
option
them all the time, they're great.
for
Or they could be
calling
built
in.
into the room here.
And basically, I mean, if you have a landline, it's more secure than a phone,
And internet, yeah.
internet, so I don't have a problem that, I mean, that to me is communication, and it counts, and you should be able to vote, because you're hearing stuff instantly. I mean, there's that delay that we go through, and then, you know, it's not good to sit here and hold a cell phone, you know, and then it's not fair for the board member, and it's not fair for the board.
But I've been in other organizations and I never have that trouble from my house. So I don't know what the problem is.
I don't either, but I mean, I sat right next to Mary Beth here, you know, when you were calling in, and we didn't hear you. So it wasn't, you know.
Something wrong with our IT stuff here.
I've used the conference phones over the course of my career with people in different states, because that's how we had to do it. And they worked well, they were clear, everybody was in, so I think that Ms. Dennicola's suggestion there is something that should be really looked into. I think it'd be a good way to address this, and I could support.
We have the same capability in our office, and actually it comes to built-in speakers and in the ceiling too, so that everyone can hear it, not just a few people in the audience.
Another question, I'm sorry. For this to get, I know we're just talking about it, it's information. How did it get here? When was the meeting held for the policy that got this policy here to be talked about?
We've met 3 times so far in some of this policy work.
And aren't those meetings open to the rest of the board?
It's a meeting with me to set the agenda, to discuss what policies are going to come forward for updates and.
Well, this seems like more than just, it was recommended to come forward. You've had to speak about it to get this language in here. You've had to address it. So my question was, when was the meetings and isn't the board allowed to come? Why weren't we notified?
Procedure, are we required?
I believe, Mrs. Jeroff, all I can share is that these policies were something that were discussed by the policy chairs and that they were reviewing policy. I don't know that it necessarily needed to incorporate the entire board as the chairs. Can anyone else elaborate?
Because you're just setting up an agenda. We bring it to the board for you guys to say yay or nay, but just like curriculum meets with curriculum and finance meets with finance, you discuss everything and you bring what you have. And then you've had this for a week or so now. So if there's changes you want to make, yeah, well, we're just one person. We have to, the whole board has to qualify it.
The whole board was allowed to go to the meetings.
That's the committee of the whole meeting. That's how it's explained to me, that is why
policies-
we're here. It's called a committee of the whole, and
Correct.
it's brought to the
But the policy's
board at that
scheduled
point.
for a reason, because you had a meeting to discuss how you want to say the policy.
But you have an option too. Right now, it's when the whole board is included. We're just setting
That
up an
wasn't my
agenda.
question, ma'am.
Okay.
Does anyone have clarification on that? Because I can't remember ever being invited to any committee meeting that I wasn't on in 3 years. Is that the norm? Was that new?
I would prefer to answer this question in an executive session.
All right.
Next policy is 903, public participation in board meetings. Policy 903 is being discussed, and the language that the policy chairs and myself were discussing was with respect to signing up in advance to speak, and the recommendation to bring forward to the committee of the whole is that there would no longer be a responsibility to sign up by 1:00 p.m. On the day of the meeting, but that people would be able to sign up at the meeting in advance of the public comment period. So it's removing, the recommendation is removing the part about signing up to their intent to speak with the board secretary or designee no later than 1:00 p.m. the day of, before, and then added the start of the advertised scheduled meeting by filling out the requested information on the sign-up sheet, which is exactly what was done in the past. So that was the recommendation as we were looking at that policy.
I just wanted to check because we spent a lot of time getting the other policy in place, and now you're reverting what we did before, or somebody's reverting it. Because, and I think solicitor went out, but I remember a court case, and I can't remember which school it was, that it was recommended we do it this way because we don't have time for, when somebody signs up to speak, we don't have time to check where they are. So now what you're doing is taking out what we fought so hard to put in. I don't understand why. There again, when was that, was this all determined, no transparency there? Yeah, we can discuss it here, but what happens then?
What happens is, if it gets next week or when we vote on this and it doesn't pass by 5 votes, then it doesn't make it.
Why? Why did you change it?
Because of the simple fact is, a lot of people have concerns after we discuss stuff.
So we
And then
don't
they
know
ask
what
for, and they would like to ask questions at that time.
you
So
don't
we're
know
allowing the public to be able to sign up and come in and speak. We haven't, that one school district that they were having the problem with was a ton of people who were coming into the district from elsewhere.
But legal told us it would be better to do it that way, so you're disrespecting what legal says, right?
I'm not disrespecting anybody, okay?
I didn't say a person.
We have a question. Go ahead, Ms. Carroll.
I walked in and I got disrespected, okay. Makes me feel like I'm at home, okay.
On this policy where they changed everything that we fought so hard to get straightened out. I don't know which school district you told us it happened to,
Pennsbury had a federal court decision on the
So
subject.
now they want to change it back after all that rigmarole we went through before, all the hours of hollering and carrying on from the public and everybody else.
She's right on that. I remember those meetings.
Yeah.
I guess my question,
You don't have to have pre-sign-in. You know, the answer is we didn't. That was part of the issue that we had raised earlier with respect to policy 903. We've written many opinions on the subject.
so do we have a requirement to vet the speakers before they speak, that they are from the district? Is that a requirement or is that not a requirement?
Well, we have a policy that says that we only allow residents to speak, so the difficulty is how do you allow a resident when you don't know whether they're a resident or not without dealing with the issue. But the problem is the federal court limited our abilities to test that issue, and that's why we raised the issue to begin with.
That's why we fought to get this. So
That's-
now we're reverting back from it.
I'm not commenting.
Yeah, so I don't quite understand what this change is, why this change is being made.
So we're not allowed to ask for ID or like a driver's
No,
license?
you're not.
No.
Oh, no, we went through all of this, and that's a good question. The answer is yes.
Okay, I understand. We went through all of this before, and I'm okay with the first comment period being done exactly the way we're doing it now. Second comment period, if they're sitting here, more than likely they're a resident or they're not gonna be sitting here. I would open it up to second comment period being allowed, but first comment period being the way it is.
I believe that's inconsistent application and could be challenged.
Could it, Mr. Sultanic?
I mean, putting all this aside for a second, and I don't want to point anybody out, there's one individual from the public here today. Why are we fighting over this policy?
There's two.
No, everyone here works for the
Yeah,
district in some capacity.
now, on that, Mr. Panarello, I will say, when there's only one or two people in the audience, you are quite correct, it's a non-issue. The purpose of having a policy is for that period of time when we don't have two people in the audience. And for those of us who have been associated with the Boyertown community for a long time, and those of you who have been on the board, we've had situations where we've had, in excess of 1,000 people at a board meeting trying to discuss that, and the policies become very important in that context. So I understand, I understand the issue. Right now, when there's no controversy, it's real easy to address the issue. But I'm just trying to get back to understand Ms. Nyman's question. When you say the first comment period, the way it is now, the way it is in the revised policy, or the way it is currently?
The way it is currently, you have to sign up the day before, or whatever hours it is.
By 1 o'clock.
And I'm
Yeah.
fine with that, but can we do the second comment period where whoever's out in the audience can talk, or is that gonna give us a possibility of litigation?
I don't know if that will give you a possibility of litigation, but the question is, do you want to allow or have that unfettered restriction for somebody to come outside of the area and speak?
The board president always has the power of shutting somebody down.
Yeah, but that becomes very difficult if you're seated at a meeting and you have an aggressive person who's coming out of the area, and I've had that happen in a number of districts. There are people who are now out and coming to school board meetings who are from outside of the district, who have all different kinds of agendas, and who have come to meetings with a view and with a issue that you may not even care about, and you would like to be able to control that. That's up to you to decide. I don't believe automatically, by the way, Mr. Brophy, that would be an unequal application of law. We could probably do that. I'm just raising the issue that the board should debate whether it wants to do that or not.
We're still limiting, we're keeping in there that it's gonna be no more than 10 speakers with 3 minutes.
You
So
could
we-
do that.
Which we're not, well, I understand what you're talking about, a local school district. The one night, they had 95 people speak until 11:30 at night.
Right.
They didn't cut it, and they allowed everybody to speak, and there were some really crazy things that came up. Even during the time when we had the mask issues, which I thought was really sensitive, what did we have? We had 20 people aside? It wasn't like we had 150. We didn't even need
It
the
wasn't
auditorium.
that long ago when we had in excess of 1,000 people discussing our transgender policy. So for those who were here then, that meeting is indelibly etched in my mind, and I'm not going to forget that one very quickly, but it's your policy, not mine.
I'd rather not change a policy. I'd keep it back the way it was.
I'm not in favor of moving forward.
I'm not in favor either. With all that he said, I don't want to go back to that type of a meeting, so keep it the way it is.
I'm not in favor of it either.
Just take it off.
All right. Then there will be 15 policies coming forward next week for first reading. You're welcome. I'm going to maintain here the microphone, I believe, actually, it's you, public comment period 1.
No one has signed up for,
Policies, I do have a comment though.
you could do discussion at the end. We're past that. We're at comment period number 1, and no one has signed up for it. So at this time, we'd be looking for the approval of meeting minutes for January 23rd, 2024, Board of School Directors.
Oh, I can't, I'm sorry. 'Cause I didn't hear myself.
What?
I don't even know when I was here. Was I here today? You can still approve the minutes. My $3 million.
Yeah, the lump sum payment.
Oh, I say
Did you
that.
find that back there?
All right, did anybody make a motion?
I'll second it.
Okay.
I'll motion, okay.
There you go.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Brad Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Roger Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Zawada,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Kratz,
Yes.
Mr. Pinarello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. I am going to be looking for the approval for the consent agenda as presented. This would be inclusive of settlement agreements for 4 individual students.
Brophy moves.
Carol seconds.
I stand corrected. It's a agreements for 5 individual students.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Brad Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Roger Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Zawada,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff, Mrs. Kratz,
Yes.
Mr. Pinarello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next, I'm looking for the Board of School Directors to approve the 7 overnight student trips as presented.
What moves?
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Brad Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Roger Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Zawada,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Kratz,
Yes.
Mr. Pinarello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next, the administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approve the BCIU 2024-2025 budget as presented.
So what moves?
I'll second.
I have a question on that. We have there's a whole list of services that they provide. Is that something that we can use if we need it? And that's already in with our costs?
That, yes.
We don't pay extra for any of that?
Let me look at what,
I am sure that there are things in there that we pay for.
the things that we pay extra for are things that are specific to our special education population. It would be anything under consultative. Those things we check off, and we have a separate budget for that they do provide us for services. For instance, we don't have a deaf teacher, so if we would have a student who would be in need of deaf or hard of hearing services, we would contract with the IU. If we need additional supports for psychologists, we would contract separately with the IU. So for contracted services, that would not be inclusive of this budget.
Okay, like school services, that's included? I mean,
School services,
okay, we just hired a consulting firm to, I don't know, teach or principal how to be a principal or whatever that was called. Would they, on the free items we get with our, they're not free, we pay for them with our fees to the IU, does that include any of that?
No. That includes the curriculums, meetings, are the connectivity of the superintendents, our special ed directors. Like, there's different cohorts of supports that way. No, nothing like what we have adopted.
That would be free, okay.
Right.
Just checking, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Brad Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Roger Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Zawada,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Kratz,
Yes.
Mr. Pinarello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next, we are looking for the Board of School Directors to approve the Plan Con Part K as presented. The approval of Plan Con Part K is a requirement from PDE.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Brad Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Roger Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Zawada,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Kratz,
Yes.
Mr. Pinarello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next, Marco Technology copier lease. We're looking for the Board of School Directors to approve the Marco Technologies copier lease proposal and addendum as presented.
Second.
This was bid out, right?
We are not required to bid out. Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Brad Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Roger Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Zawada,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Kratz,
Yes.
Mr. Pinarello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And lastly, for the Board of School Directors to approve the personnel agenda items as presented.
Nine moves. 12 seconds.
Question. On the resignation side of this, you have 2 custodians leaving. I mean, as of the first of the year, Patty, do you know how many people have actually left already, where we're at?
That would be Mr. Horn.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of the year?
Actually, how many we left and how many we hired?
I can't get you that immediately, but I can get it
Oh,
for you via
okay.
email
I'd
tomorrow.
appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure,
Thank you.
absolutely. And you want all employees or just a specific
Well, on the
grouping?
custodian side
Custodian group?
and then, like maintenance or anything,
Sure,
Grounds.
grounds, yes, please, thank you.
absolutely.
Ms. Nyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Brad Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Roger Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Zawada,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy.
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mrs. Kratz,
Yes.
Mr. Pinarello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next up is public comment period number 2. No one has signed up, so we're on to board comment.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, at the last BCTC meeting, we had, personnel come in and instruct us or tell us about the IA coming in to the BCTC. And, I was really shocked at that half an hour sitting there of what IA is gonna mean to us down the road in the school system. It's awakening. And I had another question. This was going back to our policies as far as if parents move into this area with a student that's been expelled from their school district that they were previously at, how do we handle that?
That would have to be disclosed to us, and then we would have to really evaluate whether or not that student needs to be educated within our school. Number one, they would have to make sure that they can prove residency. We would go through all of the typical things that we do for any other parent that's registering their student, but we would really scrutinize whether or not and what fraction, infraction was committed to cause that student to be expelled. I can honestly tell you that I do scrutinize students who are coming to us from various places that may not be a good mix to any of our student populations. So we do evaluate, and it's not an automatic.
We can't refuse them though, can we?
We can't refuse them, but if they need to be placed in an alternative program because it was an infraction that was a weapon or drugs or something else that's high level, yeah. But they're going to have to prove that they live here. It's not going to be, assuming that they're doubling up with somebody automatically or.
We have to pay for it then, or would there?
If they're really truly residents here, we would be responsible for that payment. But fortunately, we do have slots that we prepay for, and so it would be something that would be a part of our budget.
Does that include rentals?
If people come to rent, they would again have to prove that they're renting. They'd have to provide their lease agreement. They would have to jump through all the hoops that everybody else does in order to gain admission here.
Thank you.
Yep.
With all the policies we had tonight, the one policy I've commented on for, I guess it's about a year now since we redistrict or adjusted our polling places, policy 001 has not been changed. And I think it's been at least a year that I found that and said something, and it's still not in compliance.
What, are you talking about the policy that the court told us that we needed to adopt? Yeah, on the classification,
It
is that,
tells you that Valley Borough's in 1, Boyertown Borough 1 is in Region 1 now, not Region 2, and it's still stated on our policy, it's Region 2.
I see. It's not been updated
Nope.
to reflect what is currently the case. Okay, now I understand.
I will make sure that that gets addressed as we move forward. That will be an easy fix.
That should have been done.
And honestly, I can present it with the first reading next week of the policies and bring this one for discussion to share. And we can add that to the agenda for first reading. That one's easy. Thank you for bringing that to my attention again.
Yeah.
Ms. Kratz? Ms. Deeroff?
Oh, yes. Thank you for the presentation this evening. It was very enjoyable. Learned a lot. I wanted to say under our policy 800, and I missed it. I don't know why, but I was still thinking about that $3 million. Under there, as delegates of responsibilities, about the behavior and so forth. And I've been getting a lot of complaints about behavior of the students on the bus. I refer them to Cole Quigley Bus Service because that's whose buses are in. And if anybody follows Facebook, there's tons of complaints on there, how bad the children are. I don't want to see us have a problem. I know we have now, bus drivers are not, we don't have a ton of extra ones. I don't want to see us go down the same path with those as we are with teachers. So I don't know if there's anything you can do in that policy. It says the principal can. I think it should say the principal shall, because we can punish a child that they can't go on the bus if their behavior is bad. And I don't think we enforce anything like that, nor do I want to see us do it, but I think that somewhere these children have to start behaving and face responsibilities for their actions because they're getting out of hand from what I hear in the high school. And that's falling down to the middle school, so and nothing's being done. You know, they're still wearing pajamas, they just call them sweatpants. They wear flip-flops. I think that's a safety feature with our insurance company, I really do, because we went into that a couple years back and they weren't allowed to wear flip-flops because of safety issues with going the stairs and all. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say was we got a lot of opportunities for grants that Senator Pennicuick sent to us, and I wanted to know if anybody was acting on those grants. And I think the ESSER funds have to be completely spent by September, and I'm sure Ms. Stencole's on top of that, but I just wanted to mention it again. We have an opportunity, and they took the time to send us, the Senator's office, some of these new grants that we can apply for, and are we doing so?
We brought it up, and with Mrs. Dennicola's operation, it came up and everything else, so we kind of decided to push it to March 1st, so she could heal. But I did give a copy.
So
What's that?
she's not a grant writer, so why would you discuss it with her?
We all do grant writing, so it depends on what the grant is. And I believe that the grants that Ms. Denicola was speaking to that do open in March 1st, which have to do with the roof repair, the HVAC, all of those things she is planning to work on with Mr. Scheel. There are three other grants that have come through that are safety and security and mental health, and a meritorious one. I've already applied for the meritorious. It's already been awarded. So that's $45,000. And we are in the process of submitting, it's due next week, for the health and safety and the mental health piece. So those are being actively pursued. So those three are being done.
And Pottstown Health, Wellness, and Health, did we apply for those?
We constantly, Mrs. Bergiova is responsible for the Pottstown Health and Wellness Grant, and she is constantly updating that one every year. I know that it's split. It used to be a lot more money. It's gone down a little bit, but we do apply and receive funding from that grant.
Okay, because I know that just opened again. All right, thank you.
Nothing.
I just want to thank Ms. Landis for the presentation and Ms. Denicole for the presentation. And I'd love to see the board read over that finance. I know you got to see it today for the first time, and I got to see it today for the first time. I'd love for everyone to really look at it and understand, because questions were raised about teachers at middle school for languages and everything. As that's laid out right now with the 3% increase, it looks like there's a possibility of a deficit of $900,000 that would come out of the fund balance. Last year it was 1.8, and nothing came out of it, so it all ended up being fine. Everything evened out. So it's budgeted as it is right now. Just adding the teacher, and that's why teachers were written on there. Just adding a teacher is $136,000 per teacher. So that would have to be worked into the budget just for when we're voting. Right now it's at 3% that they're recommending. And the turf fields just so everyone understood that, are 100% not coming out of taxes. Tax increases have nothing to do with turf fields. The money is sitting, if you've looked at any of our treasury reports, every single month, that money is sitting there, and it's all there, $23 million. So I just hope that everyone reads over it and understands that finance report, looks over the treasury reports that are there every single month, and understand that that's there.
If we're taking the money out of our funds
No,
that are.
not out of our fund balance.
Any of our funds.
Oh.
If we're taking the money out of our funds to pay for a luxury item, which a turf field is a luxury item.
Well, this isn't a debate now, this is just my comment period.
Yeah,
We'll get to debate it next week, trust me.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah, I know you're dead against it, it's
I'm dead in
fine.
the water if you do
I know, that's your opinion and your prerogative. But I just, what's that? You can only take it out of the funds for capital improvements. But again, this is something that we'll discuss future, this is just my comment time. So, on that note, announcements.
Upcoming meeting dates, next Tuesday, February 27th, will be the Board of School Directors meeting here at the Ed Center. March 12th, we are going to move our Committee of the Whole meeting to Middle School East. And then March 19th, we will be back here at the Ed Center for our Board of School Directors. All of those meetings beginning at 7 o'clock p.m.
Motion to adjourn.
Lyman moves.